My sister and mother-in-law planned to ruin my wedding. Amara stood still, her hands shaking as she stared at the wedding dress in front of her. It wasn't the dress she had chosen. The fabric was old, the lace torn in places, and there were brown stains near the hem. Her heart dropped. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Slowly, she reached into the folds of the dress and found a small note tucked inside. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. 4 cruel words were written in sharp ink. "This is what you deserve." She looked up. Across the room, her sister Quesa stood with folded arms, a proud smirk on her face like she had won something. Standing beside her, Mama Nero, her future mother-in-law, acted shocked. "What happened to the dress?" she asked, pretending to be concerned. But Amara saw through the act. She knew they had done this. It wasn't just a prank, it was a message. They wanted her to feel small, unwanted, and humiliated. But Amara didn't break down. She didn't scream. She didn't even ask why. Instead, she took a deep breath, reached into her purse, and calmly pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved quickly as she dialed a number, one nobody in the room expected her to call. As the phone rang, Quesa's smirk began to fade. Mama Nero shifted uncomfortably. The call connected. Amara spoke just 3 words. "It's time. Come." Then she ended the call, turned to the ruined dress, and calmly zipped the bag back up. There were no tears in her eyes, no fear, only quiet strength. Quesa and Mama Nero whispered to each other, confused and nervous. They thought Amara would collapse or cancel the wedding, but instead, she walked out of the room with her head high, leaving them in silence. They had planned to break her, but Amara had just made a move they weren't ready for, and soon they would learn something they never expected. Amara was not alone. It was the night before Amara's wedding. The house was quiet, but her mind wasn't. She turned side to side in bed, unable to sleep. Her heart felt uneasy, like something wasn't right. After a while, she got up to get a glass of water. As she walked through the hallway in the dark, she heard soft whispers. At first, she thought she was imagining things, but then she clearly heard her name. She stopped. The whispers were coming from behind the curtain that covered the hallway storage area. Curious and worried, she moved closer, slowly and quietly. She gently pulled the edge of the curtain just a little, and her heart nearly stopped. It was her sister Quesa and Mama Nero, her soon-to-be mother-in-law. They were standing very close together, talking in low voices. Quesa was holding a tiny glass bottle, something like a vial. Mama Nero handed her a small folded piece of paper. "It will delay the wedding just enough," Mama Nero whispered. "Yes, once she drinks it," Quesa said softly. Amara's hand shook. She quickly stepped back, hiding in the shadows, afraid they would see her. Her chest felt tight. What was in the vial? What were they planning? Were they trying to hurt her? She slowly walked back to her room, holding her breath. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She sat on her bed, thinking hard. Her own sister, her groom's mother. They were plotting something terrible. They wanted to ruin her special day. But what they didn't know, Amara was already ready. 2 days ago, she had a strange feeling something bad might happen. So she made a smart move. She changed the guest list without telling anyone. She removed a few names and added a few others. People Quesa and Mama Nero didn't expect. People who truly loved and supported her. She also asked someone to be around quietly, just in case something fell off. She didn't tell anyone, not even her groom, because she wanted to be sure. Now sitting on her bed, Amara wasn't scared. She was calm, because she knew, no matter what Quesa and Mama Nero tried to do, they wouldn't win. She looked at the dress hanging on her door. Her wedding would still happen, and it would be beautiful, not because everything was perfect, but because she chose peace over drama and truth over lies. Quesa and Mama Nero had their plan, but Amara had hers too. The wedding day finally arrived. Amara stood in her dress, trying to stay calm, even though something felt off. As she walked toward the decorated venue, she noticed something strange. Half the chairs were empty. She looked around again. Yes, many of the guests who promised to come were not there. The seats stayed untouched, the food untouched, the air full of whispers. Mama Nero stood up quickly and made sure her voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is what happens when you invite nobodies," she said, shaking her head in fake disappointment. "Even her own family doesn't care to show up." Quesa folded her arms and laughed. "Maybe no one loves the poor bride," she said loudly. Her voice was full of mockery. Some guests chuckled, others looked away. uncomfortable. Amara stood silently, her heart beating fast. Her hands clenched tightly, but she didn't say a word. She looked at the empty chairs and then at the sky. She took a deep breath and reminded herself this wasn't the end. Something in her heart told her to wait just a little longer. And then it happened. A deep humming sound filled the air. Heads turned. 6 long, shiny black cars slowly pulled up near the venue. Everyone stopped talking. Even Mama Nero and Quesa went silent. The cars parked, and the doors opened one by one. Out stepped a line of people, each wearing long, beautiful robes in deep blue and gold. The robes shimmered under the sun. Their faces were calm, proud, and full of purpose. The crowd gasped. These were no ordinary guests. The last car door opened, and out came an elder man, tall and strong, holding a golden staff shaped like a lion. People whispered to one another. "That's the Zubeko symbol," someone said. "That staff means royalty." Amara's eyes widened. She didn't know what to think. The man walked straight toward her. Behind him followed more people in the same royal robes. Men, women, even a few children. One of the women held a large box wrapped in red cloth. The elder man finally stood in front of Amara. His eyes were kind but serious. "You don't know us yet," he said softly, "but we've always known you." He turned to the crowd and lifted his lion staff. "Today we honor Amara not just as a bride, but as a daughter of the royal Zubeko line." Gasps filled the air. Mama Nero's mouth fell open. Quesa's face turned pale. The guests who had mocked or doubted Amara now stared in shock. Amara's eyes filled with tears. She was no longer the poor, unwanted girl. She was royalty, and her real family had just arrived. The empty chairs, now they didn't matter at all, because the people who truly mattered were finally here. The air was quiet as the people in the royal robes stood near the wedding venue. Everyone stared, wondering who they were. Then, one of the women stepped forward. She was old, with kind eyes and a strong presence. Her clothes were beautiful, and she wore a necklace with a symbol no one had seen before. She walked slowly toward Amara and stopped just in front of her. The woman looked at Amara for a long moment. Then she smiled warmly and said, "You look just like your father." Amara's heart skipped a beat. Her lips parted, confused. "My father?" she asked softly. The woman nodded. "I am Chief Adan of Akumo. I am your grandmother." Gasps filled the air. Guests turned to each other, whispering. Mama Nero's body went stiff. She didn't move. Her face went pale like she had seen a ghost. Quesa blinked, her mouth slightly open in shock. No one said a word. The whole venue froze. Amara looked around, unsure if this was real. "My grandmother?" she whispered. Chief Adan gently held her hand. "Yes, child. We have searched for you for many years. You were never abandoned. You were stolen from your family." Amara's hands trembled. She looked over at Mama Nero, who was now looking down, her face full of fear. Quesa stepped back slowly, her eyes wide with disbelief. The chief continued, "We were told you had died, but something in my heart always said you were alive. And when we found you, we came straight here." People in the crowd covered their mouths. Some had tears in their eyes. What was supposed to be a simple wedding had turned into something no one could have imagined. Amara felt her knees weaken. Her whole life, she had believed she was unwanted, left behind. She thought she had no family, but now, standing in front of her, were people who had been looking for her. Real family, blood. Her grandmother stepped aside, and behind her, more people came forward. A man placed his hand on his chest and said, "I am your uncle." A woman beside him added, "And I am your cousin." They all smiled at her like she had been missing from their hearts for years. Amara looked at Mama Nero again, but this time with strength in her eyes. "Why did you lie to me?" she asked, her voice shaking but steady. Mama Nero had no answer. She just turned away. Amara wiped her tears and faced her new family. For the first time in her life, she felt full, seen, loved, and chosen. She hadn't lost anything. In fact, she had just found everything. Since she was a child, Amara wore the same necklace every day. Her adoptive mother, Mama Nero, gave it to her when she was little and said, "Never take this off. Never show it to anyone. Ever." Amara didn't understand why, but she obeyed. She believed Mama Nero loved her, so she followed the rules without asking questions. Over time, the necklace became part of her. She wore it to school, to bed, everywhere. She never even looked at it too closely, just followed the rules. But everything changed on her wedding day. After meeting the royal guests who arrived in long black cars, Amara was still trying to understand what was happening. Her grandmother, Chief Adan, had called her by her real name, looked at her with love, and said she was stolen. Amara was full of emotions, confused, hurt, but also curious. While the guests were being seated, Chief Adan asked Amara gently, "May I see the necklace you're wearing?" Amara hesitated. "I was told never to show it to anyone." "Who told you that?" the chief asked. "My mother," Amara replied quietly, looking at Mama Nero, who stood frozen nearby. Chief Adan reached out her hand and said, "Please, child, just this once." Amara slowly pulled the necklace out from under her dress. The moment it came into view, Chief Adan gasped and took a step back. Her eyes filled with tears. The guests behind her whispered. Some even bowed their heads. "That necklace," she said softly, "belongs to the royal daughters of Ikumo. Only the firstborn girl receives it. It was your mother's. She gave it to you as a baby before she died." Amara's hands shook. "What? You are the true heir," the chief continued, "and that necklace proves it." Mama Nero stepped back, her face pale. She tried to speak, but no words came out. People began to look at her. The truth was finally showing itself. For years, Mama Nero had told everyone that Amara was abandoned. She raised her as a favor, a kind act, but now it was clear. It was all a lie. That necklace had been kept hidden, not to protect Amara, but to hide her real identity. "You knew," Amara said, turning to Mama Nero. "You knew all along who I was." Tears rolled down Amara's face, not from sadness, but from the heavy weight of truth. The crowd murmured. Some were angry, some were in shock, but one thing was clear. Amara wasn't just a girl with no family. She was a royal. She had a name, a bloodline, a history, and all it took was a necklace to reveal it. The one thing she was never supposed to take off had now unlocked everything. The ceremony had started again. Amara stood at the altar, trying to stay strong despite everything that had happened. Guests were watching closely, some still in shock from the earlier surprises. The music played softly. The officiator began speaking, ready to guide the couple through their vows. Amara took a deep breath, ready to begin this new chapter. But just as the vows were about to start, the large door at the back of the venue opened with a loud creak. Everyone turned. A man in a simple brown suit walked in. No one recognized him. He didn't smile. He didn't say hello. He walked straight to the front and stood between Amara and the officiator. "I'm sorry," he said calmly, "but I need to pause this ceremony." The room went silent. He reached into his bag and pulled out a thick file. Without looking at Mama Nero, he handed it directly to the officiator. The officiator opened it, scanned the first page, and then looked up at Amara with wide eyes. "This is important," he said. The man turned to the guests and spoke clearly. "This file contains legal proof that land left to Amara by her late parents was secretly transferred to someone else, Mama Nero's son. The documents were signed using false papers and a fake witness." Gasps filled the air. Guests who had once doubted Amara now covered their mouths. Some looked directly at Mama Nero, who stood still, her eyes darting around, her face turning pale. Quesa looked just as shocked, stepping away slowly, as if the shame would spread to her too. The man continued. "This land was part of Amara's inheritance, but Mama Nero used her position as guardian to take it and give it to her own child. Amara never knew." Whispers filled the room. "She stole from her," someone said. "After raising her all these years," another added. Amara's hands were shaking. She had trusted Mama Nero. Even when she felt something wasn't right, she tried to believe the best. But now the truth was in front of everyone. The officiator looked at Amara. "Do you want to stop the ceremony?" he asked, gently. Amara took a deep breath and shook her head. "No," she said. "Let the truth be known. But today is still my day." Her voice was steady, strong. The guests clapped softly, not for the drama, but for her courage. Mama Nero had no words. Her lies were no longer hidden. Everything she tried to keep in the dark was now in the light. The uninvited guest closed his file and walked away. He came only to deliver the truth, and he had done it. The ceremony continued. But now, Amara wasn't just a bride. She was a woman who had faced betrayal and stood tall anyway. The wedding ceremony was going on. Amara stood strong, surrounded by people who once doubted her, but now looked at her with respect. But one person in the crowd still had that proud look on her face. Quesa. She sat straight, acting like nothing could touch her. Quesa had always made Amara feel small. She called her too quiet, too soft, too weak. She always pretended to be the better sister, the perfect one, but something was about to change. Suddenly, the sound of the door opening caught everyone's attention. A man entered, holding a small baby in one arm and a white envelope in the other. People turned their heads. Some whispered. Quesa's eyes widened the moment she saw him. Her smile disappeared. The man didn't wait for permission. He walked straight to the front and stood beside the bride. "I'm sorry," he said, "but I need to tell the truth today. Everyone deserves to know who Quesa really is." The crowd fell silent. He raised the envelope. "Inside this are DNA test results. This baby," he said, gently rocking the child in his arm, "is mine and Quesa's." People gasped. He opened the envelope and held up the paper. "Quesa told me to stay away. She said I wasn't the father, but I did the test. And the truth is right here. I'm the father, and she hid it from everyone, including her fiancé." All eyes turned to Quesa. Her face turned pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her hands shook as she stood, trying to explain, but no one was listening anymore. Then another surprise. From the corner, a well-dressed woman stood up and began walking out. It was Quesa's soon-to-be mother-in-law. She had heard enough. She didn't say a word, just picked up her bag and left. Her face showed only disappointment and shame. Quesa tried to follow her. "Please, it's not what it looks like," she cried. But the woman didn't even turn around. The guests whispered. Some shook their heads. The proud, perfect sister had just been exposed. All the lies, the judgments, the fake smiles, everything was now clear. Amara stood quietly, watching the scene unfold. She didn't say a word. She didn't laugh or mock Quesa back, but her eyes sparkled, not with revenge, but with quiet victory. Quesa had tried so hard to make Amara look weak, but in the end, her own secrets made her fall. And Amara, she didn't need to say anything. The truth had spoken for her. Everyone was seated, waiting. The wedding was supposed to start, but something felt wrong. Guests looked around, whispering. The bride was ready. Amara stood there, calm and beautiful in her simple but elegant dress. But where was Thabo? Minutes passed. Whispers grew louder. Mama Nero, Quesa's mother, leaned forward and said loudly, "He left you, just like we knew he would." Her voice was full of mockery. Quesa couldn't stop herself. She laughed, loud and cruel, looking directly at Amara. "He saw the truth about you and ran," she added. But Amara didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply took a breath and walked slowly toward the altar, alone. Everyone stared, confused. Why was she still going? The groom hadn't shown up. Amara stood in front of the empty space where Thabo should have been. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I knew you'd try," she whispered. Only a few people close enough could hear her words, but her face showed strength, no fear, no panic. Suddenly the doors opened. Everyone turned. It was Thabo. He walked in, holding the hand of an older man dressed in traditional robes. Clearly the real officiator. The crowd gasped. Some even stood in shock. Thabo looked straight at Amara with a calm smile. "Sorry I'm late," he said, "but I had to make sure everything was right." He walked up to the altar, stood beside Amara, and gently took her hand. Then he turned to face the crowd. "The man who was supposed to lead our ceremony today was not who he said he was," Thabo said. "Someone paid him to mess up our wedding. But last night, I found out. So I found the real officiator. And I didn't tell anyone because I wanted to see who would celebrate my absence." At those words, Mama Nero's face dropped. Quesa's smile faded. Some guests began to murmur. It was clear now. Someone had tried to ruin the wedding. But Amara had stayed strong. She believed in Thabo. And Thabo, he proved her right. The ceremony continued, with the real officiator. Amara didn't need revenge. She didn't need loud words or tears. Her silence and calm had said everything. And as Thabo stood beside her, proud and certain, it was clear who had truly won. Quesa looked away. Mama Nero sat stiffly, saying nothing now. Amara's moment had come, not just as a bride, but as a woman who had stayed graceful in the middle of a storm. The wedding didn't start with perfection, but it ended with truth and love. As the wedding continued, no one noticed that someone was holding a phone, recording everything quietly. It was Amara's cousin from the village of Ikumo. She didn't just record the event, she was live streaming it, but only to a private group of trusted family and elders. Every word Mama Nero had said, every mocking look, Every attempt to humiliate Amara was captured clearly. When Mama Nero saw that the wedding was still going strong, and Thabo had returned with the real officiator, she tried to act normal. She laughed loudly, hugged a few guests, and pretended she had supported the wedding all along. She didn't know her game was already over. As the guests started to enjoy the food and music, Amara's cousin quietly sent the video clips and pictures to important people in the community, elders, leaders, and even church heads. The truth about Mama Nero's lies, her plans to ruin Amara's wedding, and her public humiliation were all shared. By evening, word had spread like wildfire. People were shocked. Some called Amara's family to apologize. Others said they always suspected Mama Nero had a cruel heart. And then, at night, something unexpected happened. Mama Nero arrived home, but the gate wouldn't open. She called her husband's name. No answer. She rang the bell again and again. Nothing. Finally, one of the house staff opened a small window and said, "Sir said you're not welcome inside tonight." She laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Tell him I'm his wife," the staff quietly replied. He saw the videos. Mama Nero's smile disappeared. Her face changed completely. The door was shut again, and this time it stayed shut. She stood there in the same outfit she wore to the wedding, under the night sky, all alone. The same woman who always controlled everything, now had no home to enter, no one to listen, no lies left to tell. Inside the house, her husband sat quietly, watching the clips again. He had seen everything, how she mocked Amara, tried to sabotage the wedding, and then pretended nothing happened. It was all there, on video, from start to finish. Amara never shouted, she never fought, but the truth found its way out, in the simplest way, through a phone, in the hands of someone who cared. By the next morning, everyone in the community had heard the story, and Mama Nero, she was no longer feared, no longer respected. Her power was gone. Amara didn't just get married, she got justice, without raising her voice. The camera did the talking, and the truth did the rest. A few quiet weeks passed after the wedding. Amara and Thabo stayed low, focused on peace, healing, and each other. No drama, no revenge talk, just peace. But behind the scenes, Amara had made one quiet move. The day after the wedding, without telling anyone, she went to her lawyer and filed a case. Not out of anger, but out of truth. She had documents, messages, and witnesses, all showing how Mama Nero had tried to ruin her life, defame her, and abuse her power. And Mama Nero, she didn't see it coming. She thought Amara had moved on, forgotten everything. She laughed with Quesa every time they passed Amara's old place, mocking the memories, acting like they had won. But the real surprise was waiting. Weeks later, the court made a final decision. Mama Nero's hidden deals, the house she once stole from a widow, the false documents, everything came to light. The judge didn't even blink. The house was taken from Mama Nero and given to Amara, legally, officially, and forever. Then came moving day. Amara and Thabo stood in front of the tall gate. The sun was warm, the sky calm. As Thabo turned the key and pushed the gate open, a shiny sign caught the light. It read, "Amara House, Home of Restoration." Not revenge, not pride, restoration. At that exact moment, down the street, a black car slowed down. Inside it, Quesa and Mama Nero sat in silence. They had come to laugh again, maybe to remind themselves of what they once controlled, but what they saw made them freeze. That house, their house, was now Amara's. The same girl they mocked, belittled, tried to break, now owned the place they once ruled from. Mama Nero gripped the steering wheel tighter. Quesa blinked fast, trying to hide her shock. They couldn't believe it. Amara didn't look at them. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She simply walked through the gate, hand in hand with Thabo, into her home. A home built not just with walls and bricks, but with strength, silence, and quiet victory. And on that street, for the first time in a long time, Mama Nero and Quesa felt something they had never expected. Powerless. The house they used to mock her in now carried her name forever.